And so you were part of the kickoff to the Promise and Plan
Right.
webinar we had on Saturday, and this is a follow up from that conversation. Got it. So you may have been the one that sent in the question, "How young is too young
Yes.
to do some of this stuff?" Yeah, yeah. So, um, all right. So your 4-year-old, he's about to begin an incredible journey, as are you. And as we talked about on Saturday, this world is getting turned upside down, and everything that worked for you, some of it still will work, but a lot of it is dead. It's a lot of it's old news. And so for your 4-year-old, the question that we would put to you is, where do you want them to be 10 or 15 years from now? That would be the start of the question. So what's your answer for that? Let's say 15 years. He's 19
15
years
years
old.
from now, yeah,
Yep.
19, I want him
Describe
to be
describe
in
his life.
college
Mm-hmm.
somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
working on a degree.
Mm-hmm.
My goal is to them to be able to support, actually for both of them, they're 3 years apart, but 19 years old and
Mm-hmm.
in college,
Yep.
working on a degree, perhaps building a future for a terminal degree, perhaps um, living, having being productive and desiring to be productive,
Mm-hmm.
in whatever capacity, whatever field that he selects for himself.
Yep.
Not necessarily being a follower. He doesn't have to be a leader, but I don't want him to get caught up when just, whichever way the crowd goes.
Oh yes.
And from that standpoint,
Good.
um,
Good.
and excited about what the future holds for him. Not just I want him to be able to enjoy learning, um, enjoy being able to explore, and with the freedom to want to explore whatever avenues he pursues.
Got it. All righty. Well, you touched on several terms that I want to unpack a little bit. So you talked about freedom, you talked about college, academic productivity, etc. Not a follower. So all that stuff starts, as you know, it
Hmm.
starts now, right? It starts at birth. It starts, pre-labor. And what we want to talk about is the scouting report that we talked about last week. So the scouting report is meant to ask you questions to get a sense of where your mind is, because your son, he's too young really to know some of these things, although some of the questions you can actually ask him. Like some of the
Okay.
questions are, do you like to learn? Right? That's a question you can ask your son at 4, and he'll understand it well enough. He won't understand all the details about it, but what we're trying to do by asking these questions is to create an identity in him and an identity in you about who that young man is. Right? So if he says now that he doesn't think of himself as a learner, well, I would put a red flag on that question,
Hmm.
because that's one thing that now over the next many months and years, you're building him into a learner. Because let me just tell you, 15 years from now, uh, I, I've served on 2 college boards. I have friends that are on college boards right now. I read a ton about, I've actually had a board meeting today on one of the colleges I sit on. The changes that are happening in higher ed are absolutely breakneck speed, and I don't know what university is going to look like 15 years from now. Now we
Hmm.
know there's always going to be a need for intellectuals that are kind of pushing the envelope, but how the path to get there is shifting. And so the key point is the degree to which your son becomes a learner, starts to see himself as someone who is curious, who has his own passions. That is the young man that is going to set his own tempo as he gets into the teen years, and to learn in whatever platform is available. Are you familiar now with some of the online and kind of micro universities, micro schools? Like there's a whole explosion of these different models of education. Are you familiar with some of those?
No.
Yeah. So I'll tell you one. It's called Minerva University. May want to look at it. Um, they have no campus, but they have, well, they have no like built like football stadium or
Hmm.
academic
Right.
buildings. All their kids are scattered around the world in some hubs. Like there's a group in San Francisco. There's a group in China. Uh, I think I'm sure there's one or two in maybe London, um, And what that model works is they all are housed in one facility, one essentially apartment building. They connect and they do virtual instruction with a teacher anywhere in the world. The people in that apartment building are all in the class in a cohort together. And then in 6 months, they move to China and they do the work again in China, and they're exploring and learning in China. And then they move again, right? And that is one of the most competitive universities out there right now. I mean, like test scores and like people trying to get into it, it is one of the most competitive, and most folks have never heard about it, right?
Right.
So that is an example of how things are shifting on us, and and what we want to build into your son is flexibility. And flexibility comes when I know I can learn anything I want to learn at any time in any method that I need to be most effective for me.